you actually, to have your vote be recognized, you have to be visual on the screen. Yes.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I have 7 o'clock on March 28th, 2022. We'll begin our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. We're honored to have with us once again Rob Griebentrog from the On-Site International Prayer. Thank you so much for being here. I've asked Rob to offer a special prayer tonight for those of you that may not be aware. Our former Chief of Staff, Todd Bertrand, his father was tragically killed in a automobile crash just west of Sharon at about 8:30 a.m. this morning. And so we hope that you will all keep your prayers with his family. Todd was very close to his father. You know, his mother died about 3 years ago, and it's been a rough time for Todd. So I'd ask for your prayers. May we bless America, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pastor.
Father, as we prepare for this meeting tonight, I worship you in this place, a place that used to be a house of worship, but really still today can be, as we worship you in our hearts. Father, we were surprised and shocked at the news of the passing of Todd's father so abruptly and suddenly. And Father, we take comfort in your word that it says the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. And Father, I pray tonight for Todd and his family members, Lord, that they would sense and know that you are close, that you draw them close to you and help them very much feel your presence, your peace, and even your joy. Not the joy in what's happened, but the joy to strengthen them, for the joy of the Lord is our strength. Father, tonight as we prepare for this meeting, again I pray, as I often do, Lord, that the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts would be pleasing to you. And if they're not there yet, Lord, you would help them to become so as this meeting begins throughout the time and extending long after this meeting adjourns tonight. Lastly, Father, tonight I want to pray for this city, Lord, that we would become a city not only known for its hospitality in great, great ways, but Father, that Westfield would become known as a city of prayer, become known as a city of prayer, the most praying city in Hamilton County, and then the state of Indiana, and maybe even, Lord, the entire nation of the United States of America. Father, there's power in prayer, there's joy in prayer, in knowing you and drawing near to you. Father, help each man, woman, and child of this community in these coming days know your presence, know your joy, know your peace, and especially your love in greater and greater ways. We bless you tonight, and we pray your best in this meeting time and afterwards. In Jesus' name, amen.
And Pastor, you have a prayer breakfast coming up. Would you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah. Coming up in just about 4 weeks, we have the third annual, somewhat annual, Westfield Community Prayer Breakfast. It's going to be held up at the IMMI Conference Center on Wednesday morning, April 20th, the Wednesday after Easter, starting at 6:30 in the morning. And we'll hear from Jake Gilbert, our esteemed football coach and council member. And there'll be lots of prayer for focusing on our public schools, our administrators, teachers, students, families of this community. And it's a great time. So invite you all to sign up. Visit westfieldpraise.com and sign up soon. Thank you.
Thank you for doing so. President Johns, would you like to run the meeting?
Thank you, Mayor. Cindy Gosser, would you please call the roll?
Joe Edwards.
Here.
Scott Willis.
Here.
Cindy Spalgeri.
Here.
Jake Gilbert.
Here.
Mike Johns.
Here.
Troy Patton.
Here.
Scott Fry.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
Thank you, Cindy. We have a quorum. I have no changes to announce for the agenda this evening. I would like to remind Scott Fry, when you vote tonight, Scott, be sure you have your camera on. The new state law says you must have your camera on.
Outstanding. Thank you for the reminder.
Thank you. Okay. Next item on tonight's agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes for March 14th. Counselors, do you have any questions or any additions or changes to those minutes?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Cindy, I've got a motion to approve by Cindy Spojeric and a second by Joe Edwards. Call the roll, please.
Troy Patton,
Yes.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Joe Edwards,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Cindy Spalgeric,
Yes.
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Mike Johns.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Next item is the approval of the claim docket for March 28th, 2022. Counselors, do you have any questions or comments regarding the claims docket? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the claims docket for 2022?
So moved.
28th. Second?
Second.
Motion made by Scott Willis, seconded by Troy Patton. Cindy, would you call the roll, please?
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Cindy Spalgeric,
Yes.
Joe Edwards,
Yes.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Troy Patton,
Yes.
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Mike Johns.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
We have a special proclamation tonight by the mayor proclaiming April as the Autism Awareness Month.
Yes. Thank you, President John. Erica, would you join me? This is one of these proclamations we get to do that makes the city of Westfield, I think, a very special place. I hope you will agree. And so we would like to join the city of Westfield in recognizing World Autism Awareness Day. So I'll briefly read some of this, and then it's all yours, okay? As I turn it over to you. Some statistics I didn't know, that an estimated 1 in 44 U.S. children and 1 in 45 adults in the U.S. are affected by autism. Changes great challenges with behavior, verbal and nonverbal communication, whereas a comprehensive, collaborative approach will help to advance the research and hopefully help us to better understand this disease that affects so many. And so many families are affected by this, and I know right here in Westfield, I know probably a half a dozen families myself, very close, that have been affected by this. So Westfield is very honored to take part in this annual observation of World Autism Month and World Autism Awareness Day to address the diverse needs of our individuals and their families. Therefore, I, J. Andrew Cook, the mayor of Westfield, Indiana, do hereby proclaim April 2022 as World Autism Month and April 2nd as World Autism Awareness Day here in Westfield, Indiana.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for what you do.
Awareness dog.
Very good. Very well.
The first item of old business tonight is Ordinance 22-08, Grand Millennium PUD Amendment 1. This ordinance had a council introduction on February 14th of 2022, APC hearing on March 7th, followed by an APC recommendation on March 21st, which was a unanimous recommendation, and is up for council adoption consideration this evening. And Kevin, are you going to speak to this?
I can. I don't really have a whole lot to add to that. Again, this is in the Grand Millennium PUD. This is adding approximately 1 acre to the plan unit development in what would be the mixed-use district area of that PUD. petitioner is here, also, I think, available to answer questions. I don't believe they plan to make a presentation, however, so. This is really simply just adding acreage to the PUD.
Councilors, comments, questions?
There was one issue at the Plan Commission, if I'm not mistaken, with the Exhibit A, and something needed to be switched to better illustrate.
Yep, that's what's showing on the screen right now. This is a different exhibit that we had prepared that better clarifies the acre in question.
What are the numbers, and why do they have question marks, I guess?
I don't have an answer to that question.
Okay.
They're not relevant to the zoning of this property.
I've got a kind of an associated question for this ordinance. That parcel is currently being used for parking for the city, and we're renting that from Dan Moyer, right?
That's correct.
How long will our parking extend there? And at what, do we have alternative parking set up someplace?
That's probably, it sounds like John's going to answer this question.
So as far as the timeline goes for the development, I don't know the exact timeline at this point, but I do know that once development starts occurring, we would look to utilize the former Hardee's parking lot for some of that parking to help fill some of those needs. It is a little bit further west, but has ample space for parking along Park Street when construction's ongoing.
Do you know, have they, I think it requires 6 months' notice. Have we given them, or have they given us 6 months' notice?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay.
But given how construction timelines are going with lead times on material right now, I think we have plenty of time there.
And I might add, we've also, through an agreement, opened up the parking lot east of Grand Junction Plaza, which will more than take care of this future loss.
Okay, great, good. Thank you, John. Councilors, any other questions, comments?
I'll be abstaining from voting on this due to my role on the library board.
Can I have then a motion then on ordinance 22-08, Grand Millennium PUD Amendment 1?
Move to approve ordinance 22-08, Grand Millennium PUD Amendment 1.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Motion made by Jake Gilbert and seconded by Cindy Spoljarek. Cindy Gasser, would you call the roll, please?
Joe Edwards.
Could we have some discussion before the roll's called? I mean, that's the time for discussion. It would be very helpful for me to know what is anticipated there. Now, there's some shifting around. Well, there are never, you don't do that without some reason. Is the library acquiring that, or what's happening here? I'd like to know.
I can speak on that. So the library is not acquiring an extra acre, we're just moving the location of the library north. So the library will be at that corner of Park and Westfield Boulevard.
Okay, it will be where this is right here.
Yeah, where you see the 29 question mark and the 14 question mark, that's going to be kind of the start of the development, and it will go south from there.
And the rest of that is in the PUD then?
Yeah.
And that was not, is that the reason to put it in?
Yeah, so we want to move the library north, but we can't do that right now because that acre is not in the PUD of Grand Millennium, which is where we're occupying.
I have a question kind of along those lines, Joe. So I know we're moving this to the north, and then my understanding is the township may add on to the library, correct?
That is correct.
Are they paying for the land that they're sitting on?
Yeah, they'll be paying for the land and any costs associated with shared services or what they're adding on to.
So when we move, are we acquiring any more property? Are we increasing the acreage that we're taking? So we're just getting some of that money back?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions, comments, Counselor?
Okay, that clears it in my mind.
Okay, thank you. Cindy, would you call the roll?
Joe Edwards.
Yes, you put me on the spot.
Cindy Spalgeric.
Yes.
Jake Gilbert.
Yes.
Mike Johns.
Yes.
Scott Fry.
Yes.
Troy Patton.
Yes.
Scott Willis.
Abstain?
Oh, okay. Motion carries 5-1.
You're welcome, you're welcome. Was it,
Yes.
okay, 5-0. Shouldn't it be Cindy?
6-0-1.
Shouldn't be 6-0?
6-0.
1.
1.
Okay, thank you. The next item under old business, ordinance 22-09, creating a local historical preservation commission. This ordinance had a council introduction on February 14th of 2022, and it's up for public hearing this evening, March 28th. Do we think we have a presentation from Mark DeLasse from the Indiana Landmarks Association?
Good evening, councilors and Mayor Cook. Thank you for having me up to Westfield. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about historic preservation ordinance that you have before you. I actually work for an organization called the Indiana Landmarks. We are the statewide historic preservation organization. We're proud to say we're the largest in the United States. We were founded by Eli Lilly and a group of other Indianapolis businessmen in 1960 and have been working in communities all over the state doing historic preservation work since. So we're more than happy to be here tonight explaining about the ordinance. And I just want to acknowledge the work of Jonathan Nail as well. He's done a ton of work on this ordinance issue, and I certainly want to recognize that. So, next slide. Why are we here? Yes, we're here to discuss the benefits of a historic preservation ordinance and any concerns that the public might have. But I thought it would be helpful just to give a little background. So as you all know, the State Road 32 project is going to be going through the community. Since it is a road widening project, is how it is being designed, it's going to have what is called an adverse effect on, as designed, the south side of State Road 32, particularly as it goes through the downtown historic district. And the historic district is an area that's been recognized on the National Register of Historic Places. This is one of the things that the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966 did, was create that list of important historic and architectural properties. Another thing it did was that while the National Register doesn't provide protection for buildings on that list, it did create something called Section 106 of that act. And that provides for any time federal, and then the state of Indiana later passed a similar state law, anytime federal or state funds are involved in a project or there is licensing or that kind of activity, it does have to go through this process known as Section 106. And that is a review of how does the project affect historic resources that are recognized on the National Register of Historic Places. So that's how we get from the Westfield Historic District to a project that'll have an impact to, how do we then mitigate that impact? So as sort of it's been put forward, there are going to be 4 buildings on the south side of State Road 32 that are going to be adversely impacted by the project. And so as a result, the city and INDOT and the Indiana Department of Natural Resources came up with a document called a certificate, memorandum of agreement, I should say, or certificate of agreement between them that they authorized, as a matter of fact, right here at a meeting in this room. And they had heard from the public about their concerns about the loss of existing buildings in the historic district, ultimately made the decision to enable the project to move forward as it was proposed, but to develop these mitigations that would lessen the effect of the impact on the overall historic district. So that's was kind of our next step, was to say, how do we go about lessening that impact? So one of those, as I put up here, is to look at context-sensitive design for the area of potential effect, which included the historic district. And some of that will get into the streetscaping that will go on for improvements, burying utilities, putting in period street lights, perhaps street furniture, sidewalks, et cetera, and how to improve the overall appearance of the area. It can also potentially look at future design of the structures that are going to go up in the area, just to kind of preserve that low-scale design appearance of the district as it is now. Another item that was included in the mitigation was the relocation of Cliff Bradley's building at the corner of Main and Union, or State Road 32 and Union, also known as Pickett's in the past. So how that building could be placed on another site, sparing the oldest commercial building in downtown. And then third is what we're here to talk about tonight, is a third mitigating factor is the adoption of a historic preservation ordinance. There are a couple of others, but I won't get into those tonight. Next slide. So just to remind everybody, the look back at downtown Westfield in this area, I'm taking from the picture probably in the 1950s. That's the look at the Pickett's building there on the corner. Probably dates to about 1850, which again indicates it being the earliest building still standing. I have had the opportunity now to go through the building and check it out. And it is pretty cool how in the basement and various ways as it goes up through the building, they used logs as the structure for the building, and then took an adze and took the bark off, and that is basically how that building is constructed. Very, very solid, yet even today. So it is encouraging that hopefully, anyway, we can find a solution for keeping that around in downtown Westfield. Next slide. So historic preservation ordinances are sort of created. First of all, I'll talk about on the federal level, that eventually in the U.S. Supreme Court in around 1977, there was a decision in a case between Penn Central suing the city of New York, as the city of New York's Preservation Commission denied the ability to demolish Grand Central Station. They said, this is just too important of a landmark building for our community. We don't want to see it go away. And so Penn Central sued them. That case went all the way up to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court decided municipalities have the ability to regulate what occurs with privately owned property in communities, just as you do with zoning, you do with preservation commissions through the design review process. That's what's different, by the way, about those two. A plan commission deals with land use, preservation commissions deal with design review. So two different arenas by which the state of Indiana subsequently, probably back around 1980, created state enabling legislation that allows municipalities like Westfield to put an ordinance like this in place. So there's currently about 55 Indiana communities that have historic preservation commissions already. Most of those are what we call first-class cities, the largest cities in the state, but there are some smaller communities as well. There are about 2,500 cities and towns across the United States that also have commissions. The first ever ordinance that was passed in the United States was back in the 1930s in Charleston, South Carolina. And for those of you who have visited Charleston, you probably know what a good job they've been able to do as a result of keeping their historic integrity and character in their historic districts. So let's talk specifically about what a commission is there to do, or the ordinance that, if you all indeed pass it, what it's there to do. It sets up the Historic Preservation Commission with the intent that you are indeed looking to preserve the unique historic characteristics of the city of Westfield. You do have one National Register listed historic district now, which kind of goes up Union and across Maine a bit. But I can almost guarantee you there are numerous other maybe individual properties throughout the community that have historic significance that should be recognized and protected as such. I won't get into which ones specifically they are, but they're out there. So once the commission is put in place, then they need to go out and identify which properties are those that merit protection. And once they do, then they will bring back subsequent ordinances to you, the council, the elected officials of the community, to say, we merit that this area or that property should be protected. So tonight, you're just enabling, or April 11th potentially, you are enabling the creation of the commission, but as of the passage of this ordinance, it doesn't immediately affect anyone. That comes later with the subsequent ordinances when you all have the opportunity to review and approve the areas you want to see protected in the city. I think in the ordinance, we got down into which number precisely, was it 5? The state enabling legislation says between 3 and 9. I think the way the ordinance is written, as I said, it said 5. And again, all meetings are open to the public, so it's a very transparent process. Slide. So what can the commission do? The first thing that they should do is adopt rules of procedure, just how they function and how they operate. They should, as I said earlier, do a survey, go out and identify which are the places that merit protection and preservation in Westfield. That won't affect, ultimately, most properties in the city. Those will still be able to be, built on and changed however they want. It's just the ones that ultimately, again, you as council that will designate in the future. So those come to, as I said, it says up here, to the council. There's also the potential that Staff can help do review, because if they can do review and approve COAs for certain activities, that can move along more quickly for the property owners who have been, who are the owners of designated properties to get their building permits. So ultimately, what a property owner is doing, if they are a designated property owner, is they are seeking to secure what's called a certificate of appropriateness. That is a document that they would then take to the building, the permitting department within the city of Westfield to get a building permit. So, but the COA is approved by the Preservation Commission after they've done a review of the projects submitted by the property owner. Next slide. So here are the things, I'm not going to run through every one of these, but things that are important as part of what a commission is there to do. I do want to point out, because I know this is a concern sometimes, the encouragement of appropriate new development. I think sometimes people think that when a community passes a historic preservation ordinance, that somehow that's going to lead to the freezing or the pickling of a community in time, and that it won't ever change going forward, but that's not true. Indianapolis has had a historic preservation commission since 1967, and they have 18 historic districts, and lots of their vacant lots within their historic districts have been built out. These are popular areas to live, they're attractive, they're well-maintained, and if you can then build a building in 2022 and fit within one of those neighborhoods or historic districts, then all the better, because it's reinvesting in these areas and building the tax base of the community. So I just wanted to point that one out, that all that would happen is if, say, I was wanting to build a new home in a locally designated district, I would bring my plans for design review to the commission. They would review them, either make recommendations for changes or authorize to move forward with construction, and then I get my COA and go get my building permit. So that's how the process would work. Next slide. So this is just jumping into that point about local historic districts. Should someone decide to pursue an individual property owner or a group of property owners pursue designation, again, this is by separate ordinances that would come subsequent to. You have to get a certificate of appropriateness for changes. So let's talk real quickly about the things that are covered in a full historic district. That would be demolition, the moving of a building, new construction, as well as any changes to the exterior of the structure. So that could be, a new roof, it could be siding, it could be tuck pointing, window repair or rehabilitate or replacement are going to be, those kinds of things would be reviewed in a full historic district. And just to point out, interior work not reviewed, so not affected. Next slide. So there is a different kind of historic district that is sort of colloquially known as a conservation district. We call them kind of preservation light, and that is that it would still review the demolition, moving of a building, and new construction. However, it does not review the other exterior alterations. So if you live in a conservation district, you could still replace your windows or paint your building whatever color you want to be, any change you want to make to the exterior building, you're still free to do. So there are these sort of two tiers of historic district, which is a more comprehensive coverage, and this just covers those three things. Most people don't typically pursue moving of their structure or demolition of their most highly valued investment. New construction can be certainly an issue if somebody, that does cover, by the way, additions. So if somebody's going to put an addition on their structure, they would need to have that come in for review. But under a conservation district, your daily life isn't going to be affected. So, okay. So in a conservation district, again, you have the those three items that I talked about. Historic houses hopefully are retained. That's what you're trying to encourage, is the retention of historic properties that are within a conservation district. Owners can still invest in their property just as they would now, and in the alterations that they want to make. We're just making sure that these buildings aren't disappearing off the landscape. And then new construction that would come along into the district would be compatible with the existing structures that are already there. And by the way, anytime a district is put into place by council, what is required along with that is what's called a preservation plan. And the plan lays out kind of what the rules are for the property owners within that area. They get to develop those, that preservation plan. So the rules that everybody are going by are developed by the people that own property within that area. Okay. So these are things I just want to make sure to put out there real quick. Sometimes people have questions about what would a district do, how would it affect me, or how would it impact me. These are the things that it does not occur if you put a conservation district in place. So I won't go through every one of these, but just to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And again, I'll emphasize that last point. It doesn't discourage new construction. As a matter of fact, we have found through the years that it encourages people to reinvest in these neighborhoods and or in commercial districts in communities. Next slide. So if somebody needs to pursue a certificate of appropriateness for the work that they need to do to their property, this is a typical process that they would go through. They would consult the plan that I just mentioned. Here's what I want to do. I want to do these three things. What does it say in the plan about these three items? And then I'm going to sort of construct my scope of work based upon that plan. I then go in and submit an application. The application goes to the Historic Preservation Commission for their review. Once they approve it, you can begin the project and get that building permit and get started. So it's pretty straightforward. Next slide. So this is my last slide. I just wanted to throw up some examples of some buildings in local historic districts. I know that the one in the middle is in the Old North Side Historic District in Indianapolis. I don't recall where the other two are locationally, but they're all three in local districts and have undergone that design review process. You may look at any of these and say, ugh, I don't like that. I mean, architecture and design is oftentimes a very personal thing, a very personal perspective. But the point is that the commission reviewed these projects and approved them for new construction within historic districts. So just to make sure that we recognize in our field that these areas are ever evolving, ever changing, and it's just nice to have a process around them to protect the things that have real value. So that's it. Any questions or?
Mr. DeLacy, what
Yes.
we'll do now is we're going to have an open hearing.
Okay,
And
thank
then
you.
we'll probably, after the hearing, there'll probably be some questions for you, maybe you can respond to. And maybe Jonathan Nail can help you on some of those too, at that point. So,
Thank you.
all right, thank you. I'm going to open the floor for an open hearing at 7:40 this evening. Kevin, do we have cards?
We currently have 2 cards. Ron Moore.
Good evening, council. Thanks for taking the time to hear my comments. I believe in the preservation of our history. I think it's the thing that connects us from the past to the present and provides a continuity and stability that our community needs. And as he was pointing out, many of those things can be cherished and are cherished by many of the people who live here and have lived here for all their lives. So I was excited when I saw the opportunity to read a document that was going to define a preservation commission. As I read this document, I began to realize, and by the time I came to the end, I was extremely disappointed in the construct of this document. You see, throughout this document, I see government overreach in a lot of areas that are not necessarily in the best interest of what I would call the city of Westfield. Perfect example is in Section 2. In Section 2, it has a 2G, I believe it is, says that these are the people who are interested parties. It goes in very great detail in listing what those interested parties is, but it leaves out 92% of the people who live in the city of Westfield because it does not identify the citizens of the city of Westfield having any input to those interested parties. I continued on reading, and I found that in the powers and duties that this ordinance would grant to this commission, I find that not only do they define what historic historic district or districts are that you would have to approve, but it also gives them the power to create their own system of historical classification. It gives them the financial power to receive funds, buy, purchase, and hold real and personal property. It gives them the authority to sell, lease, or rent these properties without significant oversight. In Section 5 of this document, you find that it calls interim protection. The interim protection is something that can be issued by this commission without approval of the council, and even before a district is defined. It says that the council can identify property and slap a temporary or an interim protection on that property, which crosses over and violates the property rights of the people that own that property. And this is the essence of this document, is that the property rights in all cases of the people who own the properties that would be in a proposed district are challenged and potentially violated. And that's even before the council has a chance to vote on what the district is. Other sections of this document defines the authority of this commission to interfere with standing commissions that have the authority to zone and to handle the city affairs.
3 minutes.
There are a number of, thank you, and there are a number of other things that could be brought to mind, but I would say this: after reading the ordinance, I came to the conclusion that it is designed to establish a commission of unelected individuals with the power and authority to do whatever they choose to do within a yet undefined area of the city, while at the same time restricting the voice of the citizens of the city in its preparation, and while violating the rights of the property owners that would live in that district. I support any actions that we would take in order to be able to establish preserve the history of our great city. this document is not the one to do it. I suggest you take it back, you take a look at it, eliminate those overreaches of government that are within it, and propose something different. Thank you for your time.
Joe Plankus.
Good evening, Mayor Cook, City Council members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. First, let me say I do support historic preservation, and there are a number of excellent goals that have been laid out in this document under purpose. However, I will comment on a number of items I feel are of concern, and I will email the council on the additional ones, so I'm not taking up a lot of your time this evening. I have a concern about maintaining a balance with this ordinance. As Mr. Moore has pointed out, there's definitions of interested parties, and I think it limits, by definition, the people that are considered interested parties. As a taxpayer, I would like to be considered an interested party, but I don't see a route to that through the language that's in this ordinance. That's totally unacceptable. If you look at the appointees in the composition of the council, it appears that the mayor appoints all of the 5 voting members and the 4 non-voting members, but the city council can veto all 9 of them if they so choose. I think there should be an option that the council appoints members of that commission and the mayor appoints members of the commission, and have maybe a third method of appointing a couple members. I think it's way too limiting, and it puts all the power, quite honestly, in the council. In addition, what's a reasonable budget? It appears that there's no constraints laid out in this ordinance. Where's the budget money going to come from? If you have public meetings, I understand they can hire their own attorney. Again, here we are spending money for a commission that, in my opinion, is redundant. Many of the tasks that are laid out for this commission can be done by the Redevelopment Commission, as an example. That's already a body that's in place and has a process and a procedure. In addition, it's a non-elected body. So again, we're adding to government, again, with additional non-elected persons that are not accountable. Yes, the council has oversight, but let's face it, the language that's in there, I don't think there's much accountability that they can control. What are the sources of funds for this operation? More taxes? I know you've all said we want to cut costs. I don't see this cutting costs. I see this increasing costs for the city with a redundant operation. I think it's a terrible ordinance. I will provide additional comments to the council via email over the next few days. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Any other cards, Kevin?
Marla Ayler.
Good evening. The following are thoughts on preservation from Robert Hall, an esteemed preservationist and author of the book, This Old Building. Many old commercial buildings, even buildings still viable for restoration, have been torn down, often to make space for parking lots. Old buildings that escape demolition sit vacant or underused or in a state of disrepair. Maybe both. In the name of progress, we have destroyed much of the historic architecture that connects us with our past, but it's not too late to reverse the trend. In fact, many historic commercial properties can be brought back to life and full use by developers who recognize their cultural importance. When renovated, these buildings revive communities and give people a connection with their cultural heritage. I encourage you to approve the preservation ordinance with some minor changes that I will email you about over the next 2 weeks. But I have a bit more to say, as I have some questions. Condition 1 of the COA between the City of Westfield and the Historic Preservation Review Board states, in part, which shouldn't be overlooked. Number 1, the City of Westfield, in partnership with Indiana Landmarks, shall educate each city council member on the benefits of local preservation, of a preservation ordinance, and the mechanics of how a local preservation ordinance works, which we just saw, but I know this has been ongoing for, frankly, a number of years that I've been involved and have read more than 1,800 pages of material. And while the COA was granted next year, I'm not sure that any of you have had enough time to absorb what a preservation commission can really do. Secondly, the COA states the city will discourage the demolition of structures located at 101, 102, 103 South Union Street, and 111 East Main Street prior to the adoption of a local preservation ordinance. While I know it's not necessarily your obligation at this time, for the record, I have some questions I would like answered. I would like to know who specifically on behalf of the city was charged with facilitating your education of the benefits of a local preservation ordinance, and how has that effort been advanced? Was it via email or stated in this meeting tonight? Did you meet and do you feel fully informed? Secondly, in what meaningful ways has the city discouraged the demolition of the structures listed, and who has been appointed as the torchbearer of these efforts? Where might someone find any record of this discouragement, and are you aware of how or where this occurred? Thank you.
We have a fourth card, Elaine Henshaw.
Hello. I live at 1530 Woodside Drive. I'm not going to wax eloquent about the ordinance. I think that what I was hearing was, yeah, we need an ordinance, or we need a commission, something. And I think changes can be accomplished that way. But I do feel that there is strong community desire for some preservation to occur. This is a fast-growing community. That's not going to change, I don't think, very soon. But there's an opportunity here to do something that is good for the community and will create good. People want unique, I continue to hear, they want unique things, they want quaintness, and we could be in danger of losing and destroying things that would actually drew people here. I work with a couple of people, actually volunteer with a couple of people who are new to the community, and they're saying, please, what drew me here, and these are people my age, and I won't give you that today, but it's over 60, let's just say. Anyway, well over 60. They like the feel of a small town. This isn't a small town anymore, but they like that feel, and that's what I think historic preservation can do for us. Thank you.
Judy Shuck.
Judy Shuck, 209 West Main Street, Westfield. Where is Westfield? What is Westfield? What does it look like? I did some research, and there are a lot of communities in this state that are known for something. New Harmony, Paoli, Corydon. Corydon has one historic district, and we take fourth graders down there in the big chartered buses to see the Capitol building. Greenfield, James Whitcomb Riley. Shipshewana, they're known for their largest flea market. Nashville, it's an artist getaway colony, you might say. That's their claim to fame. French Lick, not only known for their resort and historic casino and so forth, but they're known for their beautiful railway. Aurora, down on the Ohio River, they have old architecture. They now have all of everything you would need to have a cute, small town getaway for the weekend. Metamora, that's the only community operating a wood aqueduct in the United States. Angola, They're the fourth largest natural lake. Madison, it's packed with historic landmarks also. Little Westfield, and I'm going to say that it's still little to me because I still know my neighbors, has 3 historic districts on the National Registry. And we need to preserve that. I have a sheet here of over 30 people just in an hour yesterday that are interested in preserving our heritage, our history in this community. I also went and visited people on North Union Street and on South Union Street, on Penn Street. I went in the home yesterday that was publicized on television a few weeks ago as being the home of the Underground Railroad. He was very interested in preserving our history. He's interested in preserving his home. The thing that I'm concerned with is that he's in the middle of all new construction. And if you go through Westfield, the new construction, it all looks alike. At least the older homes are unique and they look different and have something to offer, character that's different than the same cookie cutter houses in, whether they're high end or low end or whatever, they all look alike. But, you know, it talks about, Mark talked about preservation. He talked about, well, we don't have to open our homes and everything, but I think all of you have been in my home. There's nothing like it. People see me on the street, your home is beautiful. Oh my gosh, you know, but we have taken care of it. We have to encourage people to take care of their homes, the historic homes, because we can never get them back. And talk about the Underground Railroad, there were so many homes that were used in Westfield because it was so known for the Underground Railroad in the Midwest that so many of these homes, and we have lost a lot of them.
That's 3 minutes.
But I have to say, March has been Women's History Month and so forth. But there's a home on South Union Street where a wonderful lady who was an abolitionist lived in, and they're restoring that home. We have the richest history in Hamilton County and probably in Indiana and so forth. Let's preserve it. I thank you.
Harold Edwards. Sorry, you're next.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for the time. I recognize some faces up there. My wife and I reside at 401 South Union Street. She happens to be already part of the National Registry. Formerly, we're from Charleston, South Carolina, so we're very familiar with what you're talking about. I don't think you're going to find a bigger history buff than me or my family, especially those that know us. We're very proud of our heritage, and we like to preserve history. It's imperative that we do it. However, as a homeowner, I can assure you, my wife and I don't want to be held accountable or have to conform to any particular body. We want to be able to make our own decisions when it comes to our residents, so we would implore you not to pass the ordinance. I would ask each and every one of y'all, I'm sure you guys own your own homes. Would you want to have to go to a council or a board to ask for any type of changes to be made to your residents or improvements? I think the answer is no, and we're no different. I wouldn't mind seeing a show of hands of how many people here today, whether it be the council or in the audience happens to own one of those historical buildings, we do, please do not pass that ordinance. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Linda Nass, 1122 East 161st Street. In full disclosure, I must tell you that I am on the advisory team that was established by the DNR Historic Review Board. They invited several people to be part of this advisory team. I am on there representing the Westfield Preservation Alliance. We have Mark DeLasse on the advisory team. We have Chad Slider from the DNR, and several members of the city, okay? This was after, we started in February of 2019, and after many, many meetings, online, in person, and when it came to the point of the city had made an application to the DNR to build State Road 32, and even if we didn't have a historic district based on the historic records that were established back in the 1970s by the state, anytime you go through anything historic, whether it's a district or not, you have to go through a process to get approval if you're going to impact. So what this agreement was, and this preservation ordinance, is part of the compromise and agreements that we all came to say if you want to go through here, take out a lot of the properties and impact the rest of the district, there are actually, in this letter of May 2021, there are actually 11 items that you have to meet. Number one is the creation of a preservation ordinance. So this isn't something that we just said, hey, let's do this. No, this was a lot of conversation that led to this. And it said in here that the city agrees and shall draft one, that it shall promote it, duly advocate for it. So we are here to do that. If there needs to be a few changes in there, I'm not opposed to that. I didn't write this. It's kind of taken out of the state and examples of others. But we already have in the city of Westfield an LBH, Local Business Historical District Zone, which covers a lot of our downtown currently. It already does say that exterior modifications for porches, overhangs, chimneys, and room additions shall be compatible in design. It says for residential buildings, new single and multifamily to located shall be of a design and constructed with materials to be contemporary with existing structures. We've had this in place for a long, long time, as long as I've lived here. So this, you may think, is an addition to it, but it's one of the compromises that we all came to. And it was accepted because Jonathan Nail came into one of the review board meetings that we were all at and said, hey, the mayor's in favor of this. He's agreeable to this. So we're all like, okay, well, let's work it out then and do what we can. But we already do have some of these requirements under this district already. And I know since we passed the comp plan and I was involved in that, well, we don't have any design standards. When are we going to get the design standards? Well, some of them are right here, and some of them could be here. I don't see this as people telling you what to do, because there's a lot of places in this ordinance that says it's a commission, it's public, you make a presentation. I don't see it somebody with a big stick. But I do see what we've seen in Westfield. I've been here 30 years, buildings that just disappeared in one day, that nobody knew were disappearing in one day. So there wasn't a chance if somebody wanted to save them. So I think there just has to be some process, some way, some group who helps look at historic areas of Westfield. And we have many, many historic buildings throughout Westfield, throughout the township. And so there needs to be consideration for those. We have a lot of people in Westfield who do live in historic buildings. I could read off their comments, but I'm not going to have time. They do live in historic buildings. How much?
It was 3 minutes, and I gave you the rest of Mr. Plagueis' time.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I didn't hear the warning.
That's all right.
But anyway, lots of people who choose to buy historic buildings, who choose to live in historic buildings, and they'd like to see some consideration for their neighborhoods that they're living in. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Kevin, any additional cards? Okay, all right. Mark DeLasse, Jonathan Nail, would you like to respond to any of the questions that have been, comments that have been made?
Just that, you know, when we go through these processes of implementation of ordinances, and I know you all know this because you sit up here at every one of your meetings in here, there are a variety of opinions on each and every issue, each and every matter, each and every perspective that comes forward. And you're going to hear those through this process as well about a preservation ordinance. In my 30-plus years of doing this kind of work, I've heard many other types of perspectives than you all heard tonight, and reasons for why this is a good thing and why it's not. So I respect the opinions of the people that may not favor this. However, having had experience with how they work, I am actually on contract, the staff for the City of Carmel, for their Historic Preservation Commission, which has been in place since 2011. That was an ordinance that was signed by Mayor Brainerd and passed by their council. You know, maybe that's not a good thing, but, you know, I've worked with them for all the years since then, and they have designated properties by their council. It's interesting, I want to tell you a quick story because you may know him. The one person, council member, that voted against the preservation ordinance in Carmel when it went through in 2011 was a man named Ron Carter. And Ron just was like, nope, not doing it, definitely not. So the person, we had several council members spearhead it and think it was a good idea, and we got it passed and put into place, and as I said, Mayor Brainerd signed it, and appointed the members, and they were approved, and we were off and running. Well, after several years, one of the council members, a woman named Carol Schleif, moved to Arizona and had to resign from the commission as well as the council. And so she came to me and she said, you know what, I'm thinking about asking Ron to take my place on the commission. And I said, what? Ron's the one who voted against it being in place. Why do you think? She said, I think this is a good way to get him to learn what the commission does and what it's about. Ron came on to the commission and he became our biggest supporter, and every designated property that the city of Carmel has designated was because Ron brought them forward from the commission to the council, and all of them got passed unanimously. So I think now that I look at it, it was a genius move because Carol took the person, she triangulated the person who was most against it and got them to be supportive. So, you know, again, everybody can have a different perspective on this, but I feel that particularly as they learn and become more familiar with how these function and realize that they aren't intended to restrict rights that people have, but rather to put in place a process, that is what we want to see the commission do, is function for the community. So does anybody have any questions that I can answer specifically?
Before we have answered any questions, my point of order, I made a mistake. We did close the public hearing at 8:05.
Right.
So if you'll notice.
That's what I put down.
Thank you. All right. Go, councilors.
I have one question. It's just kind of an aside. The way that the commission is appointed, it's put up by the mayor and then kind of confirmed, if you will, by the council. But we have a joinder with the township. And so, you know, our planning and zoning anyway includes not only the city, but the township. So how does that work? I mean, and could it be changed that the township would have?
Sure. Yeah, I would say then residents. So the way that it is probably drafted now is to serve on the commission. Do you mean on serving on the commission or properties as they are designated? Or both?
Probably both.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at who should be appointed to the commission, the way it's written right now is you have to be a resident within the city limits of Westfield. If you're also having the township participate, then I think we would just tweak that to also make township residents eligible to serve. It may be best practices too in terms of what you do with other boards and commissions within the city presently. If township residents can serve on those, then I would say just be consistent with it. And same way with designated properties as well. In Carmel, we do, Carmel Clay Township is how it's worked there.
Just a quick comment. Actually, I thought everybody had some pretty good thoughts. I don't know who the one guy was that left. I mean, I don't remember I don't know if he said his name or not, but I mean, I think he probably made a good point. And Ron, I think Ron Moore made a couple of good points. I'd like you to address maybe what he said. I mean, part of it was, I thought we were describing the RDC actually, which I'm not, I mean, honest God, that's what it sounded like at some point. But what Ron was saying, what did you say, 5G, what did you say, yeah.
That actually is written in there that where the commission itself.
He needs to come forward so we
Yeah.
get it.
Oh, I can't make him go forward. And then I'd like him to address it, if that's okay.
Thanks for the question, I appreciate it. The way the ordinance is written right now, it has a complete section on interim protection that defines that the commission, once established, before they establish the confines of the official historic district or districts, can move forward on properties and identify them to give them interim protection, which means that it immediately interferes with the property rights of that owner of that property to do with whatever he should want to do with that property until that interim protection is lifted.
Okay.
And I think that's an extreme overreach. That was my comment.
Okay, thanks, Ron.
So the ordinance, as well as the state enabling legislation upon which ordinances are based, does indeed have interim protection language in this draft ordinance. That is put in there so that for situations where a significant property is threatened with demolition, that if the commission feels it is appropriate to act quickly to protect that property through an interim protection process, that they can do that. It is important to note one thing Mr. Moore didn't point out is that interim protection becomes the first step required to move to full designation. So you are indeed moving to place the property as a full historic district or conservation district. This is just the first step that you take to prevent its demolition.
Okay. I want to read more about it. And actually, I mean, yeah, okay.
I have a case study if you want me to give it to you.
Yep.
Here or later.
Send it to it by email.
Yeah.
Please.
It's right down the road, right down Keystone, so.
I have a practical question.
Yes.
So, Mr. Edwards, to his point, that hailstorm that came through damages his house. Exterior repair, but he's in a historic district. What does that mean for that property owner?
Well, it depends. I mean, let's say, to use your example, it's a hailstorm and he's going to have to replace the roof. If they are replacing it with an in-kind material, so say it's an asphalt shingle roof and they're replacing it with an asphalt shingle roof, they don't need to come to the commission. That's typically how preservation plans are written. If you're changing something, going from one material type to another, then you would need to come to the commission. For example, if you think about the houses along Meridian Street in Indianapolis, they are all in a local historic district protected. Many of them, so one of their key defining historic features are something like slate roofs or clay tile roofs. Those are important features of those 1920s mansions along Meridian Street. So if they were going to put back a slate roof, move forward and do it. If they're going to change it to be something else, they need to kind of come forward and say, this is why we're going to do it. And we want to do it differently.
Are decisions appealable? So if the commission said no to something that was requested, is there an appeals process?
No, you can, at least the way the typical model ordinance template is written, no, and the way the state enabling legislation is written, no. However, there is a sort of legal recourse that if you're not happy with the decision of city government, as in many cases you probably have that happen, where somebody can take the Historic Preservation Commission to court. I would think if they are going to do that, they would need to have a very good reason to be able to take it into a court of law. Like there was a technicality for which the commission made a decision incorrectly, or they didn't follow the preservation plan in making their decision, or something of that sort. But to directly answer your question, it's not like they can say, oh, we didn't like the decision of the commission, so we're going to come to the council.
So in this plan that the commission would develop, they can put in there a lot of subjective stuff, correct? I mean, are there certain things that have to be in there, or are there things that they have wiggle room? For instance, is there something that says that you could put in a plan, that if something was, say, super cost prohibitive, that then that wouldn't be required of them to actually replace with that material, or, I mean, are there provisions that you write in to a plan like that?
Again, just to point out, the preservation plan isn't just created by the commission in a vacuum. They're doing it with the property owners that may be in a designated district. So if that's the feedback that they're getting from those property owners, then that's what the plan is going to reflect. What's important is that going forward, the decisions made by the commissioners are adhere to that plan, not that they're just kind of wildly going off on to try to take as much of that subjectivity out of it as possible, but they're following what the plan says and what the property owners want to see. So,
Thank you for all your efforts on this, by the way. I
Of
know that
course.
you've been doing a lot for a very long time, so it's our Preservation Alliance. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate that so much.
What effect would the commission have on existing historical districts?
I'm sorry, I couldn't.
What effect would the commission have on existing historical districts?
So the moment you pass this ordinance, if that happens, again, no one is affected. No, your current historic districts in the city are on the National Register of Historic Places. They are not locally protected by you. So nobody is affected. It's when, say, the downtown property owners would come back and say, we'd like to see the downtown area be a local historic district and work to develop that plan and bring an ordinance to, well, bring a proposal to the commission that then, if they approve it, is recommended to you through an ordinance for designation. Then they become a locally protected, either conservation or historic district. So you're going to have subsequent opportunities to look at any area within the city of Westfield that might be affected.
So that's what I was trying to clarify. This is for current properties that aren't protected, that maybe we feel should be protected. It doesn't really have an effect on
Oh, I see.
existing.
Right. Yeah,
protect
so I like
properties.
to use this example just because, again, I'm kind of familiar with Carmel from having worked with them. So when I was told that there are 31,000 parcels of property within Carmel and Clay Township. Of those, when we did our survey, you remember I talked about the commission doing a survey to identify those historic properties or districts. There are 546 properties of those 31,000 parcels that were identified as historic. So again, even though they're just on the survey, that doesn't mean they have to come through the commission for a review process. But everybody else outside of those 546 aren't affected and won't be. So just to keep in mind, however many parcels there are within the city of Westfield, there will be perhaps as you're suggesting, your National Register districts or other individual properties that could someday be locally protected. But the vast majority of parcels in Westfield never will.
This is Scott. Can I ask a question, please?
Yes, go ahead,
Oh,
Scott.
thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. Yes.
There's a little bit of a delay, so I hope I didn't interrupt. I hope that was good time there. I appreciate Cindy's question and Jake's question for sure. And I'm not 100% sure. I've got a very similar question, but I'm not 100% sure that either of those answers or either of the answers to those questions really hit it for me. Let's say we have an existing homeowner today. That existing homeowner essentially becomes part of one of these assigned districts or one of these districts. They do not want to be part of that. I understand there's really not necessarily an appeals process if they were wanting to change their house or something like that, but what if they just simply did not want to be a part of this process moving forward as an existing homeowner? And again, I'm looking at this from the perspective of a new homeowner that wants to buy a home in an existing district. Hey, they understand what they're getting into. But I do have a little bit of a problem where the government is going to come in and say, guess what, homeowner, you've lived here for 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, whatever it is, and now you have these guidelines you must abide by.
Well, that's certainly something that you as a council member and your fellow council members have the opportunity to review at the time that an ordinance has been recommended to you as for passage that would designate that district that property owner is in, and that property owner has the right, as well as every other property owner in that district, to come forward and express to you, their perspective, that they don't prefer to be in a district. Again, I stood up here earlier and said I recognize that everybody that is faced with a historic preservation ordinance doesn't necessarily think it's a good idea. They may not like it. I, again, respect their opinion. But in looking at more broadly what is best for communities and neighborhoods and downtown districts, it's been proven that these designations will stabilize these areas. They will increase property values. There are lots of good reasons to do it. That's sort of up to you, Mr. Fry, as a counselor, to decide then what your perspective would be in a vote on that particular ordinance that would come forward.
So to oversimplify that, if I may, ultimately what happens in that scenario, as you pointed out, of course, the homeowner, of course, they have the right to come and ask the city council for an exception or to not include them in the district. However, ultimately, that decision is not made at the homeowner's benefit. It's made based on what the government says.
Yeah, I mean, that can happen.
Okay.
It can happen where a property owner is designated as a protected structure in a district that may consist of other properties of which they are one, and perhaps their opinion or position is that they don't want to be protected by ordinance.
Do you know of
But all
communities that,
protection comes down to the vote of the city council.
Correct.
Perfect. That's what I thought I understood. I appreciate it very, very much, the clarification.
Yep.
are there communities that run a commission that within their ordinance allow for individual opt-out, which is basically what Scott's kind of,
Yeah, there are a few. I will start off by saying that the state enabling legislation does not allow for that. Now, having said that, there are a few communities that have gone ahead and done it anyway. I know one, Lafayette, has done sort of what I call a checkerboard approach to a couple of their districts that they felt like, hey, we're protecting some of the key structures on the street, but because certain property owners didn't favor designation, they skipped those properties in the designation process. And then as time passed and properties changed hands, that other property owners came along later that didn't object to the idea of local designation, and those got filled in somewhat over time. Particularly if you're familiar with the North 9th Street district in Lafayette, large, late 19th and early 20th century older homes. So that's one community I can think of that has done that. There may be a couple others, but.
A couple questions, Mr. Dallas, if I may.
Of course.
In your presentation, you mentioned staff, public meetings and such. How do you find cities fund this organization, this commission?
A commission.
Yeah.
So most cities, if they fund it, they're just putting it into their annual budget. I will tell you from my experience, most of the commissions I've worked with, there's been small fiscal impact in the beginning. That's because all the people that are serving on the commission are volunteers, they're not compensated. And oftentimes the staff is from the local government, that it becomes part of their job or responsibility. We work with some communities, my organization, where we contract with local units of government, and we provide preservation commission staffing. As I said, I was
That's what you do in Carmel.
Carmel,
Okay.
correct.
The second question is, on one of your points, you said that this commission has the power to obtain property?
Well, yes, this gentleman noted that. So it is in the state enabling legislation that a commission can acquire property, either by donation or acquisition. And a good example, again, in Carmel, they have funds that the commission uses, and they have an ordinance there also called the demolition delay ordinance that can put a kind of a hold on demolition for a period of time. And during that period of time, if the commission could, let's say, move a structure out of the harm's way of demolition to a vacant lot, then it would be the commission that would take possession of that structure. So that's kind of how that's built into that language. Most commissions, I know because I've worked with them since the beginning of my career, don't actively go out looking to acquire property. So it's kind of, again, in an emergency situation that they are empowered to act in such a way. Any other questions, or would you like Jonathan's perspective on something?
I would just like to say, I'm all for the preservation, but I mean, I think Scott Fry's comments and you know, and Ron's probably shocked that I would actually agree with him. I mean, you know, but I mean, those are some good points, and I think some things need reworked. I mean, there is no way I would ever vote for anything that allows the government to say that you can or can't do something with your own home. I mean, I just wouldn't. I'd never vote for that. I mean, so I'd like to figure something else out. Ron, you can buy me a Coke later.
Ron?
Yeah. Apologize. I apologize. In the ordinance, it is actually stated under Section 4, C, Item 3, that changes to external appearance of non-historic buildings is also comes under the guidance of this ordinance. Those are non-historic buildings within the district. Thank you.
And keep in mind, this is the template state ordinance that we are proposing as part of our NDOT project. It can certainly be altered, it can be changed.
That's what I was going to ask you.
And I would highly urge us to put together a group that would do just that. I'm all for it. The preservation aspect, I struggle. You want me to buy you a Coke too, or
Yeah,
what?
you will me. Scary thought. But
I struggle with this, but I think it's something that we can, I think we can negotiate something out that would be acceptable to most people.
Is there a way to, you mentioned Lafayette having kind of a checkerboard approach. Seems a bit more conservative, a little bit more reasonable. Could we get a copy of that ordinance, John? Do you have that, or could somebody send that to us maybe as just a good read material? Appreciate it.
Well, if I can help, Mayor, in any way, or Mr. Johns, with your actions going forward to refine the ordinance to where it works for Westfield, I'm more than happy to help.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
I would just like to add my comment that I think we need to remember how we got where we are today, and the fact that we've lost a lot and have lost already a lot, and are losing a few more of the very few historic buildings that we have in Westfield. And we don't have a lot of historic buildings in Westfield. We're not as blessed as a lot of communities are. We need to try to, I think we need to try to find a way to preserve what little we have. I would ask all the counselors to take a look. We got an email earlier today from Sarah Hinshaw. And Sarah cited a study of 24 reasons why historic preservation is good for your community. And I'd like you all, if you've read it, please go back, reread it again, and take a look at all those reasons, because I think in a lot of ways they're spot on. So, and I think the mayor's right. We've been given a template of what's been used as generally across the state, but it's a template that we can look and modify and change as a vehicle that hopefully will meet our community and what we need to achieve here. I know Jonathan's looked at it. He's already made a few minor changes. It's suggested up to 9 participants, and you knocked it down to 5, and so you thought that the city felt that was more appropriate to have 5 on the commission. So I think it's something we need to look at, and hopefully we can ask questions, seek advice over the next 2 weeks, get together and come back here with more clear thoughts. That works. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, John. Moving on to our new business for this evening, Ordinance 22-14, amending the American Rescue Plan Act of the City of Westfield. It's up for council introduction tonight, and then adoption consideration on April 11th. Cindy Spoljarek, are you going to address that?
I guess I can. We do have other members on the committee here, but I've got something written out, so maybe that will help. As you may recall, when we approved the first ARPA plan, we had only the interim guidance from the Treasury. And we set forth our basic buckets, if you recall, also use of buckets, for allocating the funds. The final rule was issued January 6th, and as we discussed here before, it allows up to $10 million for the provision of government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue. And our original plan did not include this now available bucket for governmental service. The amended plan takes this into consideration, and it also provides further refinement to our buckets, if you will. As proposed, $500,000 will go toward responding to the public health emergency and negative economic impacts, AKA that is what we call here the assistance to nonprofits. $200,000. I can't read my own handwriting, sorry. $209,914 has already been dispersed for premium pay. We have $510,737 for audit and consulting costs. A lot of that is what is prescribed by the State Board of Accounts. And now to put in $3,706,720 to the revenue loss bucket, which will backfill some of the expense for the money we pledged for the Y, as well as cover about $1.9 million of the downtown stormwater project. None of this includes the second tranche that we are supposed to get in May. And you'll be seeing a plan for that come forward in June. And we'll also have to do an appropriation for that at that time. But for right now, given our first report is due to the Treasury at the end of April, I wanted to make sure that we got our amended plan reflecting taking this revenue loss approach, at least on a large chunk of this money, which will also reduce some of our reporting burden. So, hope that covers it. Any questions?
I have a question, even though I'm on the committee. How long do we have to hire the attorneys and pay them $3,000 a month? Are we under contract?
No, it was just extended.
Okay.
I mean, ongoing as needed.
I
We don't have to keep them on.
I don't enjoy paying any attorneys
Correct.
anything, so.
Correct. And once we get done with the reporting and we appropriate
hear that,
our
Troy.
second amount, we should be good and not
Okay.
need continue ongoing service.
Okay.
Scott, did you have any?
No. Cindy did a good job.
All right. Any council comments? All right, hearing none. We'll look for more information on April 11th, when that ordinance will be up for adoption consideration. Do we have any residents or guests who would like to address the council this evening?
I do have one card. I have a card for Ron Moore.
Good evening. Good evening again. My name is Ron Moore, for the record. I live at 15868 Viking Commander Way here in Westfield. I know you're getting tired of seeing me this evening, but I do appreciate your time and your patience. But tonight I bring to you something that kind of I've heard from you as I'm setting out here that I want to respond to. And a while back, several of you made statements concerning the size of the city and how fast we're growing, and the fact that we need to start looking at ways of limiting the kind of growth that we have and focusing on different kinds of growth in particular areas. Well, while I can agree with that, I also think in terms of what that really means in terms of the size of a city of 80,000 people. Can you imagine what that would be? A size of a city of 80,000 people that have an opportunity to live and use city resources that are defined by the city council and the city administration. The problem that I see is that growth, there's not enough representation setting up there that can take care of the needs of a city that size. Yes, I'm talking about the possibility of going to a second-class city or a Class 2 city, simply because it would provide more representation for the people and residents of the city, which, when you get to a size of 80,000, you need that. Pardon me. The demands of the council should be shared. If we get to 80,000 with you all sitting up there as they are right now, you're going to have a lot more people to listen to and a lot more places to go. If you share that responsibility with 2 more people that would be in a Class 2 city, you would at least be able to accommodate your day and see your families at night. Not only would it increase the representation for the residents and citizens of Westfield, it would also provide an opportunity, like I said, for you to see your families. Also, in the recent past, I've heard the council complain about the events of the past year and a half with the lawsuits that came out between the city and the clerk treasurer's office. It's extremely unfortunate that the parties that were involved in that could not get along or see eye to eye, but the bottom line is they had no responsibility to each other to do that. They behaved in the only way that they possibly could to get each other to respond. And it still exists today, that could happen again tomorrow. So, looking at the things that were in the report from the audit that spawned all of those dollars spent for lawsuits, I see that there's an opportunity within that recommends, yes, a Class 2 city. You see, it would not only take the opportunity to improve the representation, and no disrespect to the setting mayor or the setting clerk treasurer. As we move forward, to be that size of 80,000 people, there needs to be accountability. And when you have an elected official who's responsible for the funding of the city that has no requirements, but only to be an elected official, with that where you should have put those funds in the hands of a skilled professional to manage the size of budget and the amount of money that will come through as cash flow, that will come through as float, that the city that city could use to reduce our tax rates.
Thank you, Ryan.
You have in your hands the future, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate your comment.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other cards, Kevin? Okay. Clerk treasurer comments tonight?
Yeah, just one. At the last council meeting, I was asked to get estimates on cost of having our own network in the clerk treasurer's office. I've so far received one estimate, which I passed out before the meeting. This is an estimate of what it would take to get started on our own network, and this would also include our emails and our internet connection. I still have a couple more requests for estimates that I've not gotten back yet, but hopefully have them by the next council meeting, hopefully.
Okay. Thank you. City council comments. Report from the APC.
All right. APC did meet March 21st. We recommended approval for the Grand Millennium Center PUD amendment, which we voted on here tonight. We approved Plan Commission Order 2201, which is amending the declaratory resolution for Lantern Commons EDA, confirming that it conforms to the comprehensive plan. There was some discussion there concerning a future development agreement, but that was it. I'll give you the ARPA committee meeting too, because we did meet this past Friday and we voted to recommend approval of the amended ARPA plan as was introduced tonight. And we appointed a group to score the nonprofit applications. And that group consists of Michael Good, Dave Schmitz, Michelle Leonard. And I want to thank them in advance for their participation, even though they don't quite know what they signed up for yet. And they will only be scoring using the provided rubric that we have decided on, and they will not be determining the actual funding amounts. Our next meetings are April 22nd, May 20th, 2 o'clock, right here. And just a reminder that the initial applications for nonprofit funding are due by April 15th.
Thank you, Cindy. Yeah. Comments, Finance Committee?
We are probably not going to have our Finance Committee on Friday. We're going to delay that. We're going to present our financial statements on Grand Park based on the RFP in the next Finance Committee meeting. And then I'm hoping by the next meeting we have the information that we've been working with on Kevin and Jeremy on the city in terms of housing, finances. And so in the following meeting, we can actually do our joint presentation to the city council. So I do have one comment otherwise. outside of the Finance Committee, kind of addressing a little bit what Ron said. And I think this is really important for the people of Westfield to understand, is that, you know, we spent a bunch of money on a hack report that one of the recommendations was go to a second-class city. It never addressed what that actually does other than what other people have done. It doesn't talk about the costs of going to a second-class city. And frankly, we had someone who actually ran against the clerk treasurer last time who would have actually been friendly, who worked for the mayor, and the people voted that down. If you don't want a system of checks and balances, go to a second-class city. It's simple as that. The representation of 9 people or 7 people, I don't think that really matters. I mean, whether we went to 7 or 9. But I can assure you that a system of checks and balances is just as we are today, where we have an elected clerk treasurer. And just like if you're running for mayor next time and you want to put up all your own city council people and you want that all those people to check your box for you, then maybe they'll get elected. If the people want a system of checks and balances, probably not going to happen. And I think that's what happened last time, and I think people wanted the checks and balances because clearly we have an issue there. And then I'll say this one more thing. And good business people can get along with people they don't agree with. They can work together to actually create a better environment. And I get it, we haven't had that in a while, and thus the lawsuits, et cetera. But a second-class city doesn't fix that. All it does is give power to one person. And I think it's a huge mistake.
Comments, Councilors? I don't have any comments tonight. I'll turn over to the mayor.
The only thing I just following up on some of this, I know one of the things that we talked about for quite a while was which somewhat addresses all this, is to conduct an outside audit as opposed to State Board of Accounts, and we set up by ordinance a committee to do that. Where are we?
Yeah, I'll address that. So we will bring that up in the next Finance Committee meeting, but right now, I was waiting for the State Board of Accounts. Right now, I think it's if we want the audit that we were looking for, by the way, I was on board with having a third-party audit. I mean, I may not be now. Sometimes you have to admit when you're wrong, and I thought it would always be good to have an outside audit. I'm not so sure what the benefit is until the administration and clerk treasurer can actually work together to accomplish tasks. And I'm not putting fault on you or Cindy, I'm just saying in general. And I want to see that we address what the State Board of Accounts says first before we completely erase the third-party audit. I don't see the benefit in it. I audited public companies for years and years, and it's more compliance-driven. And I thought we had a compliance issue from the standpoint of numbers, and I don't think that's the case. I think the compliance is actually on addressing the codification or the statutes of the state. So
we have an ordinance that you have given to me that says that this is what we're going to do, and we've set up a commission. So I would gather it would take an action on your part to undo that?
Yep.
Because right now, I think I'm charged with seeing that it happens.
Yep. I've communicated to the audit committee what I just communicated here, and we are continuing those discussions.
Very good. Thank you.
That's all. Yep. Okay. Then we will adjourn the meeting tonight. Thank you.
Linda.